Hi everyone, welcome to the channel Sluggers Blue for your CAT RC preparation. In today's session, we'll be taking up the RC. We'll be taking up the second RC of the culture and social sciences genre, which was asked in the second slot of your CAT exam in the year 2019. I've titled the RC as Language and Essentialism, number of words 510, for just 4 questions. So kind of a lengthy RC. And yeah, so let's start. Now, for those of you who might be watching this session for the first time, know that the session is split into two parts. Part one, which is the passage explainer, where I take you through each and every paragraph of the passage and explain it in detail by the use of a schematic diagram. And part two is where I take you through the questions. The current video is part one. What you're watching right now is every session has two videos. This video is part one. And 40 such sessions make up a course that I've titled as an anthology of RCs for your reading comprehension preparation for the CAT. So, and those of you who have not watched the intro video and you are interested to know the details of the course, you can watch the intro video of this course by clicking on a cue card on the top right side of your screen. There should be you should be able to see a letter I there, and if you click on that, it will show you the thumbnail of the intro video, which you can click and well check out the details of the course. All right, so let's jump into the passage explainer now. Okay, so now guys, this is the passage explainer part of the video. Your passage explainer screen, your current screen is split into two parts. On the left side is where we'll have the passage, as you can see here, and on the right side is where we'll have the schematic diagrams. Now, the way we'll go about this is that I'll read and explain the passage paragraph by paragraph as the schematic diagram simultaneously appears on the right. Okay, post reading every paragraph, I'll explain the same in detail by the use of the schematic diagram that will have appeared by that time, and then move on to the next paragraph. All right, so let's start with the first paragraph. Starting with the first paragraph. For 2 years, I tracked down dozens of Chinese in Upper Egypt who were selling lingerie. In a deeply conservative region where Egyptian families rarely allow women to work or own businesses, the Chinese flourished because of their status as outsiders. They didn't gossip and they kept their opinions to themselves. In a New Yorker article entitled Learning to Speak Lingerie, I described the Chinese use of Arabic as another non-threatening characteristic. I wrote, unlike Mandarin, Arabic is inflected for gender, and Chinese dealers who learn the language strictly by ear often pick up speech patterns from female customers. I've come to think of it as the lingerie dialect, and there's something disarming about these Chinese men speaking in the feminine voice. So, guys, that was the reading of your first paragraph. Okay, guys, so what the author has tried to do in the first paragraph is basically just set up a backdrop and context for what is to come in the passage. And it starts with talking about some peculiar observations of his in the upper regions of Egypt, where he found the Chinese traders uh, flourishing quite well by selling lingerie to women. He finds it to be especially surprising because it's a very conservative region, right? Where so conservative that even the Egyptian families rarely allow women to work or own businesses. And in such a conservative region, the Chinese are still able to flourish by selling lingerie to women. Right? And that's what he finds a little counterintuitive. And he has provided two reasons for why he thinks that they are able to do this. Why they're right. And the first reason is where he says that, well, they don't want to gossip, they keep to themselves, right? So that is the first reason. And the second reason is where he says that the use of the Chinese sellers of the Arabic language is kind of non-threatening. Uh, and then he's explained why is that. He says that he basically provides the logic that when the sellers learn Arabic, the sellers mainly learn Arabic from their customers who are primarily female, right? Because they're selling lingerie. And now Arabic is kind of inflected for gender as opposed to Mandarin. Mandarin is the language of the Chinese traders. And what does it mean to say that it is inflected for gender? That basically means that the pronouns used for the males and the females in the language of Arabic would be different as opposed to Mandarin, where the pronouns for males, where there would probably be no difference between the pronouns used between the males and females, right? And hence, Arabic is inflected for gender, and Mandarin is not inflected for gender. And the Chinese sellers will be oblivious of this, are oblivious of this fact, and learn the language, they pick up the language from their customers who are females, and they in turn also pick up the pronouns, the same female pronouns. They end up using the same female pronouns for themselves when they talk, and hence they end up seeming non-threatening. Okay, that's what he has pointed as the reason, the second reason for why they're able to flourish so well, because they don't seem to be threatening in any sense. Okay, so that's the explanation of the second paragraph. Let's move on to the next one now. Coming to the second paragraph. When I wrote about the Chinese in the New Yorker, most readers seemed to appreciate the unusual perspective. But as I often find with topics that involve the Middle East, some people had trouble getting past the black and white quality of a byline. This piece is so Orientalist, I don't know what to do. Aisha Ghani, a reporter who worked at The Guardian, tweeted. Another colleague at the British paper, Imran Amrani, agreed. I wouldn't have minded an article on the subject written by an Egyptian woman. Probably would have had better insight. So guys, that's the reading of the second para. Okay, so in this paragraph, what the author has done is he's just talked about some positive reviews to the article, to the article that he's already mentioned, and the negative reviews of the article that is mentioned here. Right, the positive reviews, like he simply mentions, says that most of the readers found the were quite appreciative of the unusual perspective given in the article, and in terms of the negative reviews, he says that many readers had trouble getting by the getting through the trouble with the byline of the article. Now, what is the byline of the article of an article? So, guys, in the journalism jargon, the byline is nothing but the subtitle of the article, which talks about which gives information about who has written the article, basically the name of the author, right? So that's the byline. And so when he says that some people had trouble getting past the black and white quality of a byline, he basically means to say that some people had expressed some concern in terms of the identity of the author who had written this, right? And as we'll come to know, they seem to mention the gender and racial identity of the author. But that's something that we'll talk about in the later part of the passage. But for now, we can just note that the negative reviews were mainly relating to the authorship of the article, right? And then he gives the specific instances of each of these negative reviews. One was by Aisha Ghani, a reporter who worked with The Guardian, and another was by a person named Imran Amrani. Aisha Ghani says that this piece is so Orientalist, I don't know what to do. Okay, now many it might have been difficult for. I'm not sure how many of you may have been able to understand the meaning of understand what the word Orientalist in this context means. Now, normally the word Orientalist is the term that is generally used to relate to anything that relates to the eastern part of the world, to the Asian part of the world, right? So that's where the word Oriental is generally used. In this context, however, it has a negative connotation, and what it means is, in this context, Orientalist basically means being effectively empathetic in a sort of condescending manner, or just pretending to have empathy as opposed to real empathy. So when the author has expressed here that when Aisha Ghani, when she says that this piece is so Orientalist, she basically means to say that the empathy that the author of the article has demonstrated in the article towards the subjects, towards the Chinese people mainly, is not real empathy. He's just pretending to be empathizing here, but in sort of a condescending manner. Okay, that's what she means when she says that this piece is so Orientalist that I don't know what to do. Okay, so yeah, so we'll talk about this in more detail as we read the other paragraphs. All right, so I hope this is clear. Let's go to the next paragraph. Okay, so coming to the third paragraph. As an MOL is man of language, I also take issue with this kind of essentialism. Okay. Now, guys, before we move on to the other part of this paragraph, and in fact, the rest of the passage, it is extremely crucial for us to understand what exactly does the author mean here when he says, I take an issue with this kind of essentialism. And more importantly, we first need to understand what is essentialism, right? What does he mean to talk about? What is he talking about when he uses the word essentialism here? Because that is going to be quite central to the rest of the passage, and in fact the whole passage, to the central idea of the passage, right? So let's this definitely needs a detailed treatment, this term. Okay, so let's check that out and then carry on with the rest of the paragraph in the passage. Okay, so essentialism. Now, before we talk about how the idea applies in the context, we'll first try to understand what this idea means on a standalone basis. Okay, so now the way I'll try to explain to you the idea is by talking about the idea of essentialism, and also especially in the backdrop of the idea that is exactly opposite to essentialism. Okay, so I'll first take you through a hypothetical scenario that shows a view that is contrary to essentialism, and with that backdrop you'll be in a position to better understand what is essentialism. Okay, okay, so here comes a contrary view. Let's suppose there is a plant. Okay, you're walking across a garden and you come across a plant, and you start to wonder. The plant is, let's say that the plant is the end result of the act of a seed being sowed in the past, and partially it is the end result of some input, right? Someone must have sown some seed in the past, and partially it is the result of the environment in which it grew, right? So there are two factors involved for any end result: the input, which is also considered the essence from where things start, and the environment in which it is in which nurtures the plant, right? So there are two factors involved for the development of any product. In this case, we're taking the example of a plant. So, and let's suppose there is yet another plant that you observe in the same garden, and this plant happens to be blue in color. The first one happens to be green in color, and the second happens to be blue in color. Now this again will be dependent on, well, the input, the kind of seed that was sown, right, for this plant, from which it grew, and also on the environment, right, partially dependent on this and partially dependent on this, probably. Okay, and so again, even in this case, the end product is can be a factor of the initial input and the environment, right? Now, guys, the view that is contrary to essentialism is a view that emphasizes that out of these two factors, the first factor being the initial input and the essence, and the second factor being that of the environment, the contrary view to essentialism overemphasizes the play of the value, that the weightage that it is attributed to the environment. Okay, so what this basically says is that both these plants at the initial stage must have been the same type of seed, exactly the same type of seed. Okay, it is only by virtue of being in different environments that they have ended up being delivering different kind of outputs. Okay, so that which is responsible for the difference in color of these plants is basically the environment. And if you defactorize the factor of environment, essentially at the most level of at the lowest level of essence, these both are the same. Okay, so this is a view that is contrary, that is the opposite of essentialism. Let me now explain what is essentialism then. In case of essentialism, again you have the two plants, the green one and the blue one. And so what essentialism says is just the opposite. It basically says the environment has nothing to do with it. These plants are different in color because at the very level of essence, at the very core, they happen to have had different essence. Like this plant had a green seed, so it grew up to be a green plant, and this plant had a blue seed, so it grew up to be a blue plant. So that means at the most essential level, at the most fundamental level, they were different. The environment had nothing to do with it, right? So this is the idea of essentialism, guys. And generally, this is considered as a this idea is usually these days considered in a negative sense, because let's suppose if you call a person if you refer to a person to be essentially bad person, so what you're saying in that case is that the reason why they are a bad person has nothing to do with their environment. They were just born bad, and which is a reprehensible thing to say, right? And that's the reason why essentialism is generally is an idea that is not seen in a very positive light, because it seems to imply that there is something almost genetically, or if it is used in the social context, it seems to imply that there is something inherently wrong with someone, right? Although it is not always used only in social context, but that is just a good example to consider. So I hope the idea of essentialism is clear now. Now see let's just try to apply the same in the context here of the passage and try to understand what the author is trying to hint at. Okay, okay, guys, now the way we'll try to understand this idea in the context of the passages. like how it has been used in the context of the passages, by first uh, trying to understand what exactly was the point of view of the people who were not appreciative of the article, as the author says, that they were not able to get by the byline of the article. The byline is where the article mentions the name of the writer or the author, right? We'll first try to understand what exactly was their point of view when they said that. I think one of the sightings is one of them said that this article is so Orientalist that I don't know what to do with it, right? So we'll first try to understand what they mean by that, and then we'll try to understand how has the author gone about regarding this point of view or labeling this point of view as essentialist in nature. Why does the author think that this point of view is essentialist in nature? Okay, so that's the flow we'll follow. All right, so let's start. So see guys, the we'll call these people the non-appreciative people for easier reference this point onwards. So what exactly did they mean when they said that this article is so Orientalist? Okay, so there's definitely a negative connotation associated with the word Orientalist here. Okay, so what they meant was that the empathy and the understanding that is demonstrated within the article, okay, and how they are not able to relate the empathy and understanding demonstrated within the article with the writer, with the identity of the writer of the article, right? Like they basically believe that once they read the byline and then realized that the writer is a person of a certain race and of a certain gender, they were not able to associate the empathy and understanding demonstrated in the article with that person, and then hence they regarded it to be a case of Orientalism. Okay, Orientalism can be defined in this context, specific context, as effectively empathetic in a sort of condescending manner. Okay, they basically assume this to be a case where the author is just pretending to be empathetic and understanding. Okay, and it is and is actually and which is actually in a way condescending towards the people, the Chinese people, right? In this context. So the point of view when these people, when the non-appreciative people said that the article is so Orientalist, what they essentially meant is that the empathy and understanding demonstrated in the article is not genuine. It is basically a pretense. Okay, and that's what they meant by Orientalism. Okay, and that's their criticism of the article. Okay, so I hope we have understood that part. We have understood their point of view. Now let's try to understand how has the author gone on and regarded this point of view as an instance of essentialism. Okay, now to do that, we'll first try to look at the assumptions that have been made in this particular point of view by the non-appreciative people, right? So the first thing that they assume is that if an article demonstrates empathy and understanding, then it only could have been written or created by a person or a writer of a certain gender, in this case not male, or a certain race, in this case not white, right? That's one of the assumptions, because as soon as they read the byline, they assumed it to be a case of pretense. Okay, this is not sincere. The empathy and understanding is not sincere. That means they are assumed that means that they believe that only a certain gender or a certain race can set of races can demonstrate genuine empathy and understanding in an article, right? That's one. Second is assumption is just an inversion of this, that the demonstrated genuine empathy and understanding can not be demonstrated by a writer who happens to be white and who happens to be male, right? These are the assumptions that they have made in the point of view. Now the author has the way the author has regarded this point of view and these assumptions as a case of essentialism is by saying that that this point of view basically assumes that at a very fundamental level, okay, at a very level of essence and input, right, without bringing in any environmental factors, at the very initial level, at the very inherent and core level, a white male is different from a person from a different gender or different race, and that's the reason why they cannot demonstrate real empathy and understanding, and these people can demonstrate, right? So that's how the author has regarded this to be a case of essentialism. Okay, he basically says that these people, the non-appreciative people, believe that a white male, like a white male, even after like even language can in no way affect the sense of empathy and understanding of a white male. It will have no effect, right? Uh, initially, let's suppose if the writer of this description, if he was not empathetic and understanding, even after learning language, through the process of learning different languages, he could not have become more understanding, and hence they are he's inherently different from someone from a different gender or different race. Okay, and this exactly is also what the author has tried to counter throughout the passage. In fact, in the upcoming paragraph, that's what he has done. What his argument is, no, this essentialism is not true. Although I am a person, he says that, the writer says that although I might be a person who belongs to a certain gender and a certain race, still my experiences of learning different languages and the difficulties that I've faced in learning those different languages has made me a more empathetic and understanding person. And that's the same idea that is demonstrated in my article. And hence, it is not a case of Orientalism. It is genuine. The empathy and the understanding is genuine. Okay, and you are wrong when you say that, and you are being essentialist when you're saying that no, that is ingenuine. Okay, my empathy the author, that's what the author is saying here. That the empathy that I've demonstrated here, it is genuine. It is wrong to say that it is a case of Orientalism. Okay, so I hope I hope you guys were able to understand how this idea has been applied here. Now we are in a position to move on to the rest of the reading of the next of the current paragraph. Okay, coming to third para again. As an MOL, that is man of language, I also take issue with this kind of essentialism. Empathy and understanding are not inherited traits, and they are not strictly tied to gender and race. An individual who wrestles with a difficult language can learn to be more sympathetic to outsiders and open to different experiences of the world. This learning process, the embarrassments, the frustrations, the gradual sense of understanding and connection, is invariably transformative. In Upper Egypt, the Chinese experience of struggling to learn Arabic and local culture had made them much more thoughtful. In the same way, I was interested in their lives not because of some kind of voyeurism, but because I had also experienced in Egypt and Arabic as a I had also experienced Egypt and Arabic as an outsider. And both the Chinese and the Egyptians welcomed me because I spoke their languages. My identity as a white male was far less important than my ability to communicate. So, guys, that was the reading of the third paragraph. Now, see what exactly the author has tried to do in this paragraph is he's tried to address the essentialism that has been demonstrated in the point of view of the people who are not appreciative, right? Who basically made this claim that the empathy and understanding that is demonstrated in the article by the author is not genuine, is in fact just a pretense. It's just a case of Orientalism. It's effective, right? And the author is trying to counter that by saying that empathy and understanding, he says here, empathy and understanding are not inherited traits, right? These are not traits which are like other inherited traits which cannot be changed, which is something that you're either born with or you're not born with. You can inherit it, but you cannot develop it, right? He says they are not like, they don't fall into that category, right? Empathy and understanding don't fall into the category of inherited traits which you you can inherit from your parents, but if you don't have it, you cannot develop them, right? So they don't fall into that category. Rather, these are traits which can actually be developed in the proper environment. And in this case, in case of the author, the environment is that of a learning struggle, especially the struggle of learning a new language, which he says is transformative in nature, right? And that's the point exactly. That's the point he has been trying to make. He's trying to make in this paragraph that although he's a person of a certain race and a certain gender, still he has been the process of learning new languages has in fact made him empathetical and understanding, which is something that is reflected in his article. And hence, the demonstrated empathy and understanding in the article is not a facade, is not a pretense, it's real. Okay, and he has been able to transform himself into such, to gain those qualities primarily by via the experience of learning language, via the struggle. That's what he talks about. So this paragraph is mainly the author trying to uh, attack the argument of essentialism that the non-appreciative audience has made, right? Where they said that his article is, or his piece is Orientalist in nature. So he starts with giving a general description how, right, how any person can become more empathetic and understanding, and then cites the case of the Chinese as the example, that is how the Chinese must have become more thoughtful in their struggle to learn Arabic, and how his was also the case. So he first gives uh, a general structure of the process, a general mechanism, and then he exemplifies the case of the Chinese as well as his own case as specific instances of that general structure, right? And then finally he closes with saying that the reason why the Egyptians and Chinese welcome him was mainly because of his language, was mainly because he was actually empathetic and understanding. His identity as a white male was far less important than the fact that he was able to communicate empathetically and in an understanding manner. Okay, so the paragraph has been about the author trying to uh, attack this essentialist claim on part of the non-appreciative audience. All right, let's go to the next one. Okay, coming to the fourth paragraph, and that easily lobbed word Orientalist hardly captures the complexity of our interactions. What exactly is the dynamic when a man from Missouri observes a Jizang native selling lingerie to an Upper Egyptian woman? If all of us now stand beside the same river, speaking in ways we all understand, who's looking east and who's looking west? Which way is Oriental? That, guys, is the reading of your fourth paragraph. Okay, so see, guys, what the author has done in this paragraph is basically made some more rhetorical points relating to the same argument that he had been making in the third paragraph, the last paragraph, right? He says that, well, the word Orientalist is quite easily lobbed, but it's something that can hardly capture the complexity that of the interactions that the author used to have with the Egyptians and the Chinese. So basically, he's just saying that their interactions used to be quite empathetic, as well as there used to be a good level of understanding between them, right? And the word Orientalist doesn't capture that at all. And then he uses the rhetorical devices. He says that what exactly is the dynamic when a man from Missouri, that means he's referring to himself, observes a Jizang native, that means the Chinese seller, selling lingerie to an Upper Egyptian woman, right? Like, what is the dynamic? And he goes on to say, and he goes on to make a very generic and strong point here, where he's on a fundamental level, where he's saying that if all of us stand beside the same river, now he's not actually literally talking about standing beside the same river. What he means to say is that if all of us share a certain context, that we know where we are, what we're talking about, and speaking in ways we all understand, and while sharing the context, we also are able to use languages that we all understand, then who's looking east and who's looking west? So what he means to say here is that if we all understand the context, and if you all have the skills to communicate, knowing the language, speaking in ways that we all understand, then there is no room left for any kind of pretense of empathy, because pretense of empathy, or pretense of understanding, fake understanding, can only uh, insincere understanding can only arise when, well, when the understanding is not real, when the one of the persons has actually not understood, or is actually not able to empathize with the other people. Only in that case there is room for an Orientalist outlook, an insincere empathetic outlook, right? So what he's saying is that, but if we already, if there is no, if there is complete understanding basis a common context and basis a common way of speaking, there is no room left for Orientalism, right? Sorry, not Orientalism, the Orientalist perspective, and hence, so he is basically making, again, strengthening his point by in a rhetorical manner here. Okay, so that's your fourth paragraph. Let's move on to the next one. Coming to the last paragraph, for all our current interest in identity politics, there's no corresponding sense of identity linguistics. You are what you speak. The words that run throughout your mind are at least as fundamental to your selfhood as is your ethnicity, or your gender. And sometimes it's really healthy to consider human characteristics that are not inborn, rigid, and outwardly defined. After all, you can always learn another language and change who you are. So guys, that was the reading of the last paragraph. Okay, so what he's trying to explain here in this paragraph is he says, for all of our current interest in identity politics, there is no corresponding sense of identity linguistics. Now, guys, first of all, identity politics is basically any political measure that aims at gaining advantage by dividing people on the basis of some inherent characteristics, right? Like gender, race, ethnicity, etc., caste. Okay, characteristics which cannot be changed, which are generally considered to be inherent or core, right, for a person. So that's what identity politics is. So he's saying that for all our current interest in this idea, identity politics, there is no sense of identity linguistics, and the reason is because language is not one of those personal characteristics that cannot be changed. It is not an immutable aspect of identity like race, gender, ethnicity. It is something that can be changed, right? And hence there is no sense of identity linguistics, like as opposed to identity politics. Okay, and what is more, apart from language being something that can be changed, it is also something that at the same time is fundamental to a person's individuality, right? So as a result, what you have here is you have a factor that is fundamental to your individuality on which you do have control, as opposed to ethnicity, gender, etc., other factors. So language is one such factor, is one such unique factor which is fundamental to your selfhood, at the same time allows for change, and hence using that, it is healthy. He says that it's healthy to consider human characteristics like language that are not inborn, rigid, and outwardly defined, and allow you to change yourself, right, by learning another language. That means getting better or learning more, gaining more qualities like the author did, those of makes the point that he did, that like qualities like empathy and understanding, etc. Okay, so that's what he's trying to say here in the last paragraph. I hope that's clear. Okay, so the central idea of the passage can be summed up in the following sentence. The implied essentialism in the idea of the alleged Orientalist outlook is inaccurate and misleading, as it overlooks language's ability, especially in the context of learning one, to transform the learner for the better. Okay, so with that, we are done with the central idea. Okay, guys, so now for those of you who have not attempted the questions so far, you can do so by clicking on the link given in the description of the video, and it will take you to the link will take you to an interface where you can attempt the where you can read the passage as well as attempt the questions. And yeah, so that's about it so far as this video is concerned. Those of you who have not watched the intro video of the course, you can do so by clicking on the link here, and so do subscribe to the channel. I'll see you meanwhile in the next part where we discuss the questions of the passage. Okay.